Hello YouTubers, and welcome back to Go Figure Customs YouTube channel. It's time once again for another 2-minute tutorial. I've talked about this topic a few times in different videos, but I don't think I've ever done one specific video just for this. I see this question asked very frequently, and there's always a lot of different opinions and answers to this, but I'm going to tell you my opinion, my answer, and why. And that question is, what paint do I use when I customize? Or what paint should you use when you customize? First off, primer your figures. Second off, seal your figures when you're done painting. Those two steps will let you use pretty much any acrylic paint. So that's the first thing. Acrylic versus enamel paint. You want to stay away from enamel paint. Enamel paint does not cure on softer plastics like the ones that your G.I. Joe figures are made out of. So, or any toy line. I mean, it'll probably cure on some harder plastics like vehicles, but it will not cure on softer plastics. That was one of my first mistakes when I first started customizing. So, primer, acrylic paint, seal it. Now, as far as brands of acrylic paint, my first go-to paint is Citadel Paint. It's also called Games Workshop Paint. You can get this at any hobby store. It's available online through any number of online hobby stores and even eBay. I've gotten colors off of eBay before. It comes in different types. So this is a base paint. There is a layer paint. There is a paint that is subline called contrast. It's more of a wash, but it's thicker than the washes, and then the washes. And then they make some technical colors, like texture. So I did a Dutch I did Dutch from Predator when he's covered in mud, and I used one of these technical paints and kind of splotched it on to make him look like he was covered in mud. They also have an Airbrush Paint line. I'm not sure that they're still making that. I've seen some hobby stores discontinue that and put it on clearance. So that is my go-to paint. It is very versatile. You can thin it out and use it as a wash, any of the colors as a wash. You can let it sit in your brush and dry brush it on, or you can use it as a base layer. So it's very, very versatile. It will go through an airbrush. You do need to thin it out with Flow Improver, Airbrush Flow Improver, and thinner. You want to get it about the consistency of milk. All right, my next paint that I highly recommend is Tamaya Paint. They have a fantastic line of realistic military colors, browns and greens and blacks specifically. They also have clear colors. Like I have some clear orange here, transparent orange. I've got a yellow, a green, a red, a blue, and they also have a very nice line of metallic colors. This paint can be a bit difficult to use. For the new person, you need to stir it. So I have a paint stir made by Badger. They're usually about 12 bucks at a hobby store. It needs to be stirred, not shaken, just like James Bond's martinis. And it needs to be, if you paint it on, you need to let the area dry before you go over it again. I also highly recommend using a wet palette. That's a wet sponge with a piece of parchment paper over it. Put your paint on this. The water mixes in just enough to thin the paint out so it goes on in lighter coats and doesn't glop up. The problem with Tamaya paint is that if you don't use either of those techniques, you paint over it and then you go back and then you just like smush off the paint that you've just painted on. So people, new customizers find it very difficult to work with unless you know those tips or tricks on painting. It runs fantastic through an airbrush, which was something I recently discovered. Well, I discovered it probably last year, but it runs fantastic through an airbrush. You do need Airbrush Flow Improver for that. Maybe thinner, maybe not thinner. Sometimes that paint is pretty runny, so it may not need thinner to run it through an airbrush, but it does work through, it's fantastic in an airbrush. Okay, what's next? A new company called Army Painter War Paints. This is, my hobby store lady said that it's some of the people that either did Games Workshop or Tamaya Paints, I don't remember which, started their own line of paints. Number one, stay away from their sealant. Don't use their sealant. It doesn't dry on softer plastics. It's specifically made for harder material, like the kind that you would use on Warhammer miniatures. I used their sealant on one of my customs, and it last year, and it's still not dry, and it probably won't ever be. However, the paint is very good. It's a little thick, so the wet palette again is very handy. It thins it out just enough to put a light coat on. I like their primary colors, like their blue and their red. The black is very nice. I've used the orange. In the gold, their gold is my new go-to gold. I used to like the gold from Games Workshop, but they changed the formula probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I don't like what they did to it. It separates in the bottle, and it turns into this like red mud. You can shake it up, and it comes back into the way it is, but their gold is good. As far as using it through an airbrush, it does work through an airbrush. You do need to use flow improver and thinner for it because it is a thicker paint. Another brand that's very popular with the customizers is Vallejo. I recently started using Vallejo probably in the last couple of years. I really like it. Again, this is a thicker paint as well. It's pretty much the same kind of stuff that you would get from Army Paint. They have a fantastic array of colors. It works well for if you thin it out, like the Citadel paints, you can thin it out and use it as a wash. You can let it set in your brush and dry brush with it. It also does work very well through a airbrush. Again, that one will need flow improver and thinner to get it to work, to get the consistency you need to run it through an airbrush, but it will go through an airbrush just fine. And they have all kinds of cool colors. If I need a weird color of paint, Vallejo is the brand that I go to for that. I have a specific color I used on a barbecue custom, thanks to Johnny at KR Customs for that. I've got a weird green color that I used for one of my Toxo Vipers. They make an additive for the paint that gives it a metallic look. Another weird color for like some radiation leak that I used on another one of my Toxo Vipers. Their black and their white are very nice. Sometimes black and white can be hard colors to use. And let's see what else is next. And Vallejo has a bunch of sublines. I bought a set of purple that's really nice. Let's see what else do we have here. Scale 75 scale colors. These come in sets on Amazon's where I've been finding these, and they're usually in a set of like 5 or 6 at a time. I bought the metallic set, and I really, really like it. There's like 6 different types of metallic colors in that set. It's pretty much the same consistency as the Army Paint and the Vallejo paint. It's a little thick. So again, the wet palette is very nice. It does run very well through an airbrush as well. You just need to thin it out with some flow improver and thinner. They also have, I also have a flesh tone set that they use, or that they've made. that's very nice. I've used it on a bunch of my customs. However, my go-to flesh color paint has been Barbarian Flesh from Army Paints. That's the best that I've found so far. And I've done a 2-minute tutorial on improving your flesh tones, and I talk about that paint in that video. Let me see what else I got sitting around here. You know, I think that's about it. I know a lot of people use paints from like one of the other big paints people use is Testors Model Master paints. Those are the ones I started out with when I was a customizer. I do not like them. They are very thick. They dry out very quickly in the jar, and I just find them to not be very good paints. I do not use Model Masters paint anymore unless they have a specific color that I cannot get in any other brand. And that has been the pearls. So a pearl is kind of a glossy metallic kind of finish. I needed something in a purple pearl. I don't remember what custom I used it for, but I needed a purple pearl, and Model Masters was the only one that made that color, so I had to use that. Somebody sent me a couple bottles of Testors paints because they weren't using them. I threw them away. I do not use Testors Model Master paints, but I know some of my friends do, and they swear by them, and that's fine. I don't like them. Apple Barrel Paint is one that you will find at Walmart. I tried that myself. It does not adhere to the figures very well. It's very thick. It's cheap paint. I think if you seal it, you'll probably be okay. But again, I had very poor results with it the one time I tried to use it. It's like 69 cents for a big bottle of it, whereas, you know, the Citadel paints are a couple bucks for just one bottle. Paint is one of those things, you get what you pay for. Paint is going to be the good stuff's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be worth it. And then I can't think of any other brands that I would recommend staying away from. But like I said, primer it first, because what is primer? Primer is something that helps paint adhere to a surface, which is really what you want. So primer all your stuff first. I have a video on what primers to use on this channel, so have a look at that. And then seal it after you're done. I've also done a video on sealants, so have a look at that as well. I think that pretty much about covers the question of what paints to use when you customize your action figures. So, thank you for watching. Please do all that fun social media stuff. Like, share, subscribe, comment below, sound off on what paint brands that you like to use. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.